Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Entrepreneur Coach podcast. I feel very lucky to be interviewing our guest today, Melanie Benson. Melanie and I have known each other since when I lived in Seattle, which was definitely like maybe around 2011 or 2012. So it's very odd to say we've never met before, or maybe we did in Seattle, but it was definitely over a decade ago. And I have watched Melanie's journey and her business and just seen her growth, her evolution. And so I knew that she had to be one of our entrepreneurs to come on and talk to y'all. So welcome to the Entrepreneur Coach podcast.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled to have this conversation today.
So you were just telling me, but why don't you kick off by telling our listeners, how long have you actually been an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I started my business in the year 2000. So as we're airing this, we've just hit 23 years.
Wow. And
Yeah.
that means you've seen a whole lot of different even eras of business, because you were in the 99, is the world going to shut down? Are all the computers going to crash? You went through the 2008, dip. You've been through a lot in your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up because I was working for a Fortune 500 company that specialized in communications for public safety. So as we bridged that gap from 1999 to 2000, we were ready for all of the world to crash. So I was already laying the groundwork for my business at that time. And, coming out of that environment into the world of being a coach and running my own business, I was as successful as I was there. I was so ill prepared for what it meant to be in business for myself. And without going too deep into this pain, I gave my notice 10 days before the Twin Towers crashed.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur Coach podcast. I'm the Entrepreneur Coach, Bree Seeley. My mission is to help female entrepreneurs like you have the audacity to believe in the inevitability of your success, then to gather the resources, tools, and knowledge you need to create your most aligned and profitable pathway to your vision of success. This podcast is all about providing you with a nitty-gritty behind-the-scenes look at what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur. Forget the success porn and the rags to riches stories. Each episode will pull back the curtain and share the reality of entrepreneurship. I cannot wait to be part of your journey.
Melanie Benson, authority amplifier and possibility igniter for expertpreneurs, shows you how to create million-dollar visibility. Since 2000, Melanie has a proven track record of accelerating results for her clients. It's not uncommon to see 2 to 5x revenue increases in the first 6 months. She's host of the top 1.5% podcast, Amplify Your Success, co-host of Next Level Influence, the author of Rewired for Wealth, and Entrepreneur.com's startup guide to starting an information marketing business. She's been featured in Authority Magazine, Bloomberg Businessweek, Women's Day, and Parenting.
I was so ill prepared for what it meant to be in business for myself. And without going too deep into this pain, I gave my notice 10 days before the Twin Towers crashed. I literally sat there and watched that happen on the TV and thought, oh, this is going to be very different than I thought it was. And, obviously mortified for what that meant for us as a world. But yeah, I started my business in the middle of a world crisis.
Wow.
I went through the 2008 market crash. I've been through this new dynamic coming out of the pandemic. And so the funny thing is we were going through the pandemic, even though there was a lot of unknowns and a lot of uncertainty, I went into that prepared, knowing that I had within me the resourcefulness to navigate uncertain times because I birthed my business in them. I navigated not so successfully the financial crisis and came out much stronger, learning a lot about myself and the world. And so, yeah, I think every world crisis we go through, I'm just more and more aware of what it takes inside of me.
I love that we're going here, because, we've kind of been teetering on this, like, are we going into a recession? Aren't we going into a recession? And I was just reading something online the other day about how a lot of people are seeing 2024 as just kind of like a gap year, because we're waiting to see who the new president's going to be and what that's going to look like and how that's going to shift our world. So I know a lot of people are really on the fence about business and entrepreneurship. And should you really double down on a business in the midst of a crisis? What's your take on that? How has that obviously played out in your life multiple times?
I feel like uncertainty is a part of life. Like, we are always going to have things we're uncertain about. And I don't want to kind of gloss over the fact that we're in very interesting times. But if you look back over the last 4 or 5 years, we've just gone from one type of uncertainty to another type of uncertainty. And it's almost like when you, as a business owner, develop determination, resilience, and a commitment to having the impact you want to have, to having the financial success you want to have, you have to get good at navigating uncertainty. And the key, for me at least, and what I work with my clients on, is like, where's the relevance factor as the world goes through each shift? So I'm a business coach. My relevance factor is going to be different than someone else's relevance factor. But what I think the worst thing you can do is go in saying, Pollyanna, it's like, I'm just going to keep plugging away. Everything's going to get figured out. Okay, maybe. But what if you went in saying, look, I need to really plug in and understand, because messaging is such a critical piece of success in turbulent times. What if you plug in and say, where are my superpowers needed right now? Where can my business solve a problem? Or where can the work that I do be more relevant as my ideal clients are weathering this current storm in the world? So I serve people who are experts in what they do, and I help them figure out how to be a recognizable expert. So you could imagine that's going to look different as we weather new storms. So my clients who were speakers, when we went into the pandemic, their relevance factor drastically changed in the matter of 7 days. They went from thinking, okay, will this pass, to this isn't going to pass. I think I need a new game plan to financially make it through these unpredictable times, because nobody knew it was going to happen. Mindset also plays an important part. Nobody's going to be buying anything right now. Everybody's kind of freaked out. I'm taking the foot off the gas and I'm just going to go chill out. Or you can say, what is the version of me that succeeds in this no matter what?
Yeah.
How can I tap into a level of resourcefulness that allows me to serve people who need what I do, even if it looks different than the way I think it's going to?
Yep.
So I choose the second path.
Same. I think this is a really important conversation, because there are so many people that are like, oh, well, when the world gets back to normal. I've been studying a lot of history lately, back even into like the 17 and 1800s. I'm reading this really interesting book right now that talks about the financial crisis that happened when all of the railroads went bankrupt back in the 1700s. And I was like, I never knew that story. I don't think I'd ever heard that happened even before, the first one we kind of hear of is the 1920s market crash. But there were multiple crises before that crisis. And then that crisis fed into another one, which fed into another one, which fed into another one. And, my question is really like, are we ever at a place where it's a quote unquote good time to be an entrepreneur? Or is it more that we use messaging, we use mindset, we use our resiliency to make it a good time for ourselves?
Well, there's this cliche saying, I think, that more billionaires and millionaires are made in times of challenge than they are in times of abundance. I think it is what you make it. And I'm a firm believer in the stories we tell ourselves create a filtering system that we see the world through. Back in 2002, I'd been in business a couple years, and I was really, I wasn't getting things going the way I'd hoped. I was doing okay. Like, I was getting some cash in the door. I was starting to, see some clients starting to raise their hand and go, okay, Melanie's doing something interesting. I'd like to know more. I was running this networking group in Los Angeles and I was doing okay, but I certainly wasn't what I would call thriving. And I took a training with this man who became one of my mentors, using NLP and hypnosis. And I thought, oh, I'm going to learn a tool. What I wasn't prepared for is the transformation I was going to experience around the filtering system I ran my business through. And I went from being really stuck on what I was willing to do. Like I had drawn a line in the sand and I was like, I'm not doing that over there. I'm only doing these things right here because this is my little comfort zone here, to, oh my gosh, I'm capable of doing whatever I set my mind to. And the only thing that shifted was my filtering system. I went from telling myself limitation stories and letting limiting beliefs run every decision I made. Instead of making every decision through the lens of fear, I started making every decision through the lens of what would have to happen for this to be a success? What would I have to be willing to do differently to get results I've never had before? I became a possibility igniter rather than a possibility limiter. And so I believe when we are in unprecedented times, when the world is revealing to us a path that we don't know how to navigate, which I truly think we're just going to see more and more of, instead of like, okay, I don't want to play that game, I'm out, or I don't know how to do this, or I'm afraid because I don't have any cash flow to invest in the next thing I'm doing. It's what's the version of me where this is already successful? I've already gotten where I need to be. And that plugs me into seeing resources and opportunities that maybe I couldn't see or be willing to take action on before.
One of my favorite questions is shifting from I don't have it to how can I create it? And it sounds very similar to what you're talking about, is like if we approach something with this like blindfold on of I don't have it, I can't do it, shutting down all the possibilities, shutting down all the opportunities, into a place of kind of taking that blindfold off and saying, well, what could I do to create it? What questions can I ask that will help me go there? How have you used this even more in your business?
First of all, I just want to say, because I think sometimes we look at someone who's had significant success and we say, oh my gosh, they're untouchable, or they must have like this silver spoon that just keeps serving them opportunity. I'm scrappy. I like
Same.
have failed miserably, horribly, painfully, where I literally was on the verge of giving up. And I think the only reason that I'm still here is because there's a part of me that is so committed to impacting the world in a positive way and succeeding in that endeavor, that I won't give up. Like I'm highly unemployable. Like I cannot be employed, right? It's like, that's not in my DNA anymore. And so I've had to figure out how to pick myself up and go again when maybe like I've tapped into a new level of imposter syndrome, or when the failed attempt has like activated so much shame or frustration or overwhelm that I'm like, how do I pull myself out of this one? What I find really, really helpful is to recognize it is not a straight line. It is not only up. It is up, it's down, it's sideways, it's reverse and then go back forward, right? And I think we're always having to reinvent ourselves, to reconnect to what's important. And we have to keep coming back to, why do I do what I do? Why am I here? What is the impact I'm meant to make? Where do I need to plug into something that's so much bigger than just me, that I don't talk myself out of doing what needs to get done next? And I think when we plug into something that's so much bigger than any of us as a human individual, and we plug into the collective of, I am here to be a ripple maker, to be a game changer, to be a world blazing, impactor, whatever that is for you, then you realize stopping is not in the formula. We just have to go about doing it differently. And again, this is coming back to mindset, resourcefulness, determination, momentum. I truly believe we cannot do this alone. You need coaches, you need support systems, right? You need
Yeah.
team.
I think a lot of people have a misnomer as well about these ideas of resiliency and determination and, cultivating that relationship with our vision and all of these things as being like a switch and like you flip it and then you have it and it's there and you're good. You and I both know it is a process, a step-by-step kind of daily thing. How do you maintain that relationship with your vision, with your resiliency, with your determination? Like, what does that tangibly actually look like for Melanie Benson on a daily, weekly, monthly basis?
So I do some exercises with my clients and I do them for myself at the same time. I do simple things like reconnecting to like a SWOT analysis, which stands for strengths. I like to call them superpowers, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And when we do that, you get to look at like, am I really living in my greatest superpowers? Am I letting my weak areas dominate my focus and my energy and pulling me out of that which I'm meant to do? Am I tapping into the opportunities that are right in front of me? And are they my opportunities to really say yes to? And where are there threats emerging that I could either elevate the way I'm doing my work so that those threats get completely mitigated? Or do I need to maybe look at them and say, how do we like navigate that so that it's not going to take the work that we do out of the game? And again, coming back to those relevancy factors. So that's one thing I do. I think secondly is it's like who I surround myself with. I am regularly in connection and communication with amazing thought leaders and peers who we like plug each other into what's next, what's possible, what's the version of me that's succeeding wildly at this rather than feeling like we're flailing or struggling. For me, when I am in that mastermind or that conversation or that collaboration energy with somebody, I want to be a better version of me. Where they are going, the success that they're doing drops me into what's the version of me that has that or something more. I use that as momentum. I use that as inspiration and to plug into my internal fire source. And again, like I have crappy days when I'm like, what am I doing? Like, where am I going? And so I may need to book a call with my mentor, or I'll book a call with a colleague or friend and say, I need a pep talk. I tap into resources. Something else, exercise and diet. I want to talk about the non-successy things, right? Because I am somebody who my energy source is very permeable. I can be impacted by things going on around me. So I have to every day do things that are moving my body. Like I cannot sit in this chair all day without moving it. I have to be really conscious about the fuel source I'm putting into my body. And I look at the version of me that was pre-2010, where I was not conscious of that and intentional, and the version of me that's after 2010. And I am super committed to having a high vibration by what I put in and how I take care of my body, not just mindset only.
I'm honestly so glad you brought this up. This is a huge element in the most successful people, the most successful entrepreneurs that doesn't get talked about enough. Usually when people want to talk about success, it's business success. And the truth is that if we're not taking care of ourselves on a holistic level, we're not going to have a business because we're not going to have an us, because we're going to have sacrificed ourselves to such a point that we can't show up in our business. We don't have the energy to cultivate that resiliency within us. We don't have a clear head to be able to think through the SWOT analysis or the messaging. Those are the things that I think so many entrepreneurs neglect in the process.
Mhm.
And they truly sacrifice themselves for their business. And I'm really working hard right now to help women kind of like shift that. You are the priority, your health, your wellness, all of those things are like top priority every day. And then your business gets to be a result of you taking care of yourself.
I've worked with a lot of women, particularly who were experiencing deep levels of burnout. And there's this belief system that it's because I was pushing too hard, when actually that may have been part of it. But what was really going on was a neglect of the mechanism that fuels your motivation and your energy source. We have significant levels of energy dysregulation and people, finding themselves in growth opportunities that feel overwhelming. And because they don't have ways to regulate their own energy, they're misinterpreting that and saying, oh, this is not for me. Like, I'm not supposed to go here, when really they just aren't healthy enough to have the energy to go where they're going next. We've seen people with all kinds of autoimmune diseases and chronic illness and, like I said, burnout and just simply overwhelming anxiety and depression. And again, all of these things are part of the human condition, but I truly believe that if we tap into things that give us energy and become super intentional about that, we can overcome a lot of those, what feel like limits, and turn them into igniters for where we're meant to go next.
Even tying this back into kind of where we started our conversation, there's so much that we can't control. All of the things we talked about before, all the crises, we can't control any of those things. There's something about starting my day with a lot of things that I can control that proves to me how strong, both physically and mentally, because weightlifting is a big mental game as well as a physical game. Also just giving me a win for the day, first thing, that even just helps me show up better in my business. It's really, when I started working out, never thought that the correlation would be there. And it is amazing how much better I've been able to show up in my business just by starting my day off with those healthy practices.
I love this so much. I'm thinking about so many places where we, particularly as women, we diminish our power source because we're not claiming agency over that which we can take ownership of. I don't know about you, but like there's something in me that's so much bigger than me as an individual that I'm meant to do. Like every single thing I've gone through, from traumas to business learnings to all the things that grow us and expand our capacity for success, I'm meant to hold space for other people to learn from that. I believe that's part of my journey as a mentor, as a coach. But when I'm exhausted and I can't think straight because I'm depleting my energy sources, and part of that is my own internal messaging. What story am I making up around it? What emotion am I feeling about certain events? What am I attaching to events? Like, I have a choice what I attach to an event and whether or not that is giving me a desire to go further with it, or if like it's becoming a roadblock now because I've made a story up this is a negative or a bad thing. These are our own decisions and our own energies that we attach to things. So one of the things that I learned, I'm not perfect at this, but I feel like I'm doing a much better job as the 50 plus version of me rather than the pre-50 version of me, is to really look at what meaning I attach to things. Because I can tell very quickly, oh yeah, that just totally derailed me. I just let that spiral me out. And now I am no longer in a good energy pattern. I am in a dysregulated energy because I just gave that a negative meaning. I had a client who, she does trauma-informed work. And interestingly enough, she'd gone through a really, really scary, overwhelming, and very sad trauma. All of her brain wiring attached negative, very like damaging stories to everything that would have grown the reach of her work from that moment on. And so one of the big things we had to work on was like, okay, how could we attach maybe a more neutral association to this event? Because it's not a bad thing or a good thing. You're just telling yourself it's a bad thing. So I think that's one of the things we have to look at as successful entrepreneurs or emerging entrepreneurs, is what energy am I attaching to every single thing that's going through my day, going through my mind? And am I giving it a meaning that's going to propel me forward, or is going to act like an anchor that's going to pull me into the muck and keep me stuck there?
When I wrapped the women's conference that I launched in September, I really had to do a lot of work like in the weeks leading up to it to get to that neutral place. And then also on the back end, because one of the things I've really been exploring is I don't believe that anything is ever like 100% success or 100% failure, right? Like it's a continuum. We're somewhere on that spectrum, but it's never 100% of one thing or the other. And going through exactly what you just said and kind of reassigning meaning and asking those questions of like, okay, did I really fail? Or did I just make a decision that was ill-informed and misaligned at the time? And what can I then do to shift my information next time so that I can make a better informed decision, right? And like that feels so much better and has allowed me to move forward so much more quickly than I'm a terrible person, I'm stupid, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't deserve to be in business. It's just such a different conversation that we have with ourselves when we can do exactly what you just said.
Oh my gosh, so true. My greatest failure in business spiraled me out for so long because all I did was make myself wrong and bad over it, even though a lot of it was beyond my control. There were several things that helped me really reshape my story I made up about it and kind of shift gears. And one of them was a quote from Sarah Blakely, a story that I'm sure you're familiar with, where she talks about like how her father indoctrinated into her and her siblings that if you're not failing, you're not growing. And I think up until that time, I really had this deep pain and trauma around failing at something. Like my childhood experience with it was, had a lot of negative consequences. And so I literally had to recalibrate what I make a failed attempt mean. And I think when we can embrace failure as learning, again, this is like, it's a quip, right? Like we hear this all the time, make it mean something else. Well, truly, failure does not mean we're bad, does not mean we're stupid. It does not mean anything except for the meaning we give it. If we're not failing, we are not growing. So I like to think of it as like, what am I willing to test? What am I willing to try out to see where I can go next? And am I willing to make that investment in where I want to go? And there's that beautiful saying, I might have been Les Brown who quipped this originally. It's like, we're shooting for the moon. We may land on the stars, but at least we're not going to still be on the earth. And I think we have to embrace that. Like, what am I willing to try to get where I want to go next? And am I willing to fail at it to get someplace else closer to where I ultimately want to be?
Well, and the truth is, if we don't take that first step, the subsequent steps are always revealed after we've taken the first few steps, right? Like you can't stand at step 0 and expect to see step 100. You don't have the perspective for that yet. But if you've taken step 1, then steps 2, 3, and 4 get revealed to you. You have to be willing to at least have enough skin in the game and take the risk to take those initial steps. I know like we're so at time and I'm just like so satisfied by this conversation. I want to keep going, but I also want to respect your time. This has been honestly one of the most fulfilling conversations. I don't want to negate any of the previous ones, but that I feel like I've had on this podcast. So first of all, I just want to say thank you for being willing to pull back the curtain with me and like really go there about some things that really aren't touched on a lot in the entrepreneurial journey on a public level. So thank you.
Bree. Yeah. And I guess I would say that we have to honor all the pieces. I think one of the reasons why we do get stuck, that we do get into trauma as business owners and our energies get so dysregulated, is because we're not honoring all the pieces. Like we can't have the light and the good stuff without having some bad stuff too. And we've glorified only the successful pieces as a human race. Yeah. And I think we have to honor that all of the things are going to be in the mix to get where we want to go. And it's just part of the journey.
Tell people where they can connect with you, how they can learn more from you, have a potentially conversation with you.
So you can find everything about me at melaniebenson.com. I'm pretty much on every social media platform, and please feel free to reach out there and give me a little like shout out and say you heard me here on this amazing podcast with Bree. I also put together something that could be a real game changer. And if you recognize that you really want to take a leap in your business, one of the things that I tapped into in those early days, and I've used every time I reinvented myself, is what I call tapping into $1 million visibility streams. And it is the ultimate in co-created collaboration and being able to accelerate our path to making a greater difference. And, it's like they're all around us all the time, which we have to kind of tune in our thinking to see them and be able to generate our own growth in our audience. And so if you go to melaniebenson.com/ECP, Entrepreneur Coaching Podcast, so ECP, you'll be able to download that as a free gift. And it's how how I take 7 key steps and tap into $1 million visibility streams all around me that have added at least $1 million, if not more, in revenue to my business, and how you can replicate that same kind of growth and acceleration for yourself.
Love it. I just downloaded it. So
Ooh.
I'm very excited to go through this as well. Yeah, very excited. Thank you for the lovely gift. And again, just thank you so much for sharing your heart and your journey with us. This was such a fulfilling conversation and just enlightening. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Bree.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Entrepreneur Coach podcast. I hope you gained valuable wisdom from this episode and have at least one thing you can act on today. As I always say, listening to this episode will not change your life. What you do afterwards will. Please be sure to leave a rating and a review of the show, and don't forget to share this episode with a friend or colleague who could use it. Last but not least, please have the audacity to believe in the inevitability of your success today. You deserve it.